How to use a table saw. 3 points of inspection. I'm going to check the motor and housing on the back side. I'm going to check for any damage. I'm going to make sure the belt is on. I'm going to look for any missing pieces. I'm also going to check the cord, which is on the back side. Check it for frays or damage. I'm also going to check the blade. I'm going to pull up the guard. I'm going to spin the blade and look at it. Make sure it's not warped. Not too many teeth have broken out of it. Now when I get ready to use it, I'm going to make sure I have my PPE, make sure I have my shoes on, and sometimes you might want to wear earmuffs if you do a lot of cutting with this. It gets pretty loud. I'm going to ensure that it's unplugged before I make any adjustments and setup, because I have to actually set the saw to what I want to cut. Normally with any other saws, you draw on your material and then you bring the saw to the material and cut. In this scenario, you set up the saw and then bring the material to it. I'm going to set my blade depth. I've got a piece of 3/4 stock here, so I'm going to set it 1/4 of an inch deeper than my stock. The kind of rule of thumb is I can align it to the edge of the blade, and I want to see that my teeth are just poking up through it. And this is done by, as I showed you earlier, the blade depth. I'm looking up here at the height of my blade as it pokes out the wood, and I'm going to loosen the knob a little bit and crank it down so only about 1/4 of an inch sticks out past my wood. About 1/4 of an inch, a little bit less than the blade teeth protruding from the top of the wood. That's the difference between losing your hands or not. Now I'm going to set my fence. I'm going to rip a piece that's 2 inches wide. We use table saws to make rip cuts. It has a measuring guide on it, but it's pretty wore out. So what I'll use is a tape measure, and I'll place this part against the fence, and then I'll look at the 2-inch line and line it up with my blade. You can see that I've rested the end of the tape measure against the fence, and the 2-inch line lines up with this side of the blade, the right side of the blade, because it's going to take 1/8 of an inch kerf out of whatever you cut. Now I use the handle here to lock it down, and I double check to make sure it hasn't moved, because sometimes the fence will move. Now I'm going to plug it in and turn it on. As I showed you earlier, this tool has a 2-stage turn on. Master on-off switch. You turn it to on, and you watch the lights blink back and forth till the red light quits. If it doesn't quit, it means you have a problem. A lot of times you turn it on and something's blinking. It means either the fuse the reset needs to be tripped, or the brains in this thing's been tripped. To turn it on and off, simply pull the paddle out, and to turn it off, you push it back in. And as you hear, it takes a second or two for it to quit turning. Now when I get ready to cut, since I'm making such a small cut, it's within the red zone of the saw. I'm going to actually use a pair of push sticks, and you can use any scrap that you can find. They actually make really fancy ones, but they tend to disappear around here. So I'm actually going to use a pair of push sticks, almost like chopsticks. And I'm going to start it with my hand and use the push stick to hold it down and to hold it toward the fence. My focal point is right here along the fence. I'm not necessarily watching the blade, because what'll happen is you cut, the wood's going to want to come off the fence at different angles, and it'll make for a crooked cut. So my focus is on sliding this piece of wood right along the edge of the fence the entire time. Another thing that you always have to do with a table saw is when you cut, you have to push your wood, whatever you're cutting, completely through. Never pull back. That's where you get what's called as kickback, where the blade, whatever you're cutting, will grab, the blade will grab a hold to it, and it's spinning and it's throwing it towards you. It will actually come back and hit you right in the body, about as fast as a fastball out of a pitcher. So I'm gonna turn it on. I'm gonna make a complete cut with push sticks, push it all the way through. Then I'm gonna turn it off. At this point, you make sure you push your wood all the way through past the dog. Now I can cut it off. I can either touch it with my hand or bump it with my leg. I'm done. I'm going to turn the master power off and unplug it. Now I'm ready to maintenance. Just like everything else, I'm going to make sure it's clean and dry. This thing collects a lot of sawdust. We have to blow these things off regularly, especially on the inside. I'm going to pull the guard up and clean all down in here with the air hose once it builds up a little bit. And I'm also going to check the blade. I'm going to spin it toward me a little bit. And I'm looking down the line of the blade to make sure it's not warped or bent out of alignment. That is how to use a table saw.